3 billion people on a road that leads to eternal hell who've never even heard how they could be saved, and we're sitting back just kind of coasting through Christianity. That's crazy.
There are billions of people who will never know a believer, who will never lay eyes on a Bible in their life.
That's got to change. We got to change that. I gotta live for this.
Hey guys, welcome to the Sens podcast, How Change Happens. I'm Andy Bird, super pumped, really excited to be with my friend David Platt today. And David has been a hero to me for years, following his journey of inspiration for me towards the least reached peoples around the world, but also just a radical, wholehearted, sold out life in God. And so we got to meet a number of years ago and have had some moments together that have been so rich, so good, and share such a common, passion for God's purposes among the least reached, but also for just a general a quality of sold out, wholehearted Christianity across the earth. So David, super grateful we can get some time together, and would love it for those that are jumping onto this podcast, maybe just to introduce yourself, a little bit of an introduction of kind of what you do, so that everyone kind of gets a little bit of context for our conversation.
Yeah. Well, man, the only bad thing is I'm not in the same room with you. One, because I'd love to be in Kona, and two, I'd love to be just, man, yes, when you mentioned just the times that we have had in person together, yeah, it's just good. It's so good to
So good.
be with brothers and sisters who are just, running after Jesus, and to seek him together, and to have fun doing it, like just pure joy. So anyway, so a little background about me. So I live in Metro DC. I'm a pastor of a church here it's a beautiful church family, 100 plus countries represented in our church family. So people from the nations, all united around the gospel in this city that divides over everything. So just the person of Jesus bringing us all together. And so, my wife and 6 kids and I live here, and we've got ages 19 down to 3. And then we've been here about 8 years. And then I lead a radical ministry called Radicals, or radical.net, that is focused on helping followers of Jesus make Jesus known everywhere, specifically with a focus on making Jesus known among the 3+ billion people who have little to no knowledge of the gospel right now. So, I guess that's a quick summary.
That's
of
a
me.
great picture. And then we both are adoptive fathers. So your family makeup, you have 6 kids. How many biological, how many adopted, where are your adopted kids from?
Yeah, so 4 adopted. The quick story for us is just kind of how God led us down that road. We walked through infertility for years, and the Lord used that to open our eyes to adoption, which I would have said at that point, it's like, it's kind of second best because we can't have children this way. We'll adopt.
Right.
We learned real quick that adoption was just as best. And so we adopted our first son from Kazakhstan. And then we got back, and 2 weeks later, my wife was pregnant. So, we joked what happens in Kazakhstan doesn't stay in Kazakhstan. My second son doesn't love that joke in particular. But anyway, so then our second son came along 9 months later. Obviously, we knew we were able to have children biologically, but we knew we wanted to adopt again. So for the next 3 years, we went through actually a failed adoption process from Nepal. But then opened a door for us to adopt from China. And so our first daughter's from China, and then we got back with her, and 3 months later, Heather was pregnant again. So her doctor was like, if you have 4 or adopt 4, you'll have 8. We were like, I don't know if that's the plan. So we were kind of joyfully content with 4 at that point. But then, man, one date night, Heather and I were just at the table. We hadn't even planned on talking about adoption or anything. And it came up. It was like God just met us there in an unusual way there at date night. And we walked away like ready to start the process again. So we adopted our a fifth child from China, and actually waited 3.5 years to go pick him up in light of COVID. So he came home. I'm trying to remember when that was, a year or two ago.
Yeah.
And then, but then while we were adopting him, sorry, this is a longer
It's
story, but
awesome.
while we were adopting him, the Lord, both of us, Heather and I do the same Bible reading plan. We spend our time alone with the Lord in the morning, but in the same place in the Word. And we both were in the same psalm talking about children being a heritage from the Lord in Psalm 127. Blessed is the man whose quiver is full of them. And we both had this sense the Lord was leading us to adopt again. And so we got together and we're talking, trying to feel each other out, and all of a sudden we're like, you were thinking, I was thinking. So yeah, we started a parallel adoption process at that point while we were waiting to go pick up our son in China. And so that led to the adoption of our last child. Her name is Mercy. So yeah,
Wow. Wow.
that's our story. Hey, and I got to tell you, I mean, this is a long story already, but just evidence of God's grace, and sovereignty and leadership. So I just mentioned her name, like we'd been praying, okay, I think you're leading us to do this again. We worked through a just great gospel-centered ministry when it comes to that adoption. And we both kind of had on our hearts, if the Lord were to lead us to adopt a little girl, we would love to name her Mercy. Well, we get this information about this birth mom who's going to place, incredible birth mom who's going to place her child for adoption. And she says, the only thing is, I have a name already picked out for my little girl. I really want her to be named Mercy. So
Oh my gosh.
yeah, it was really beautiful. Just
That
a
is
picture of,
incredible.
yeah, God's leadership and all that.
Wow. Oh, I
So
love that. I love that. You are living it in your home. I mean, just the heart for the nations, for the those that may not have the same opportunities. I mean, just to see the way you guys have done this, and we, have a similar story. Not ours is the
yes.
opposite, for biological to adopted, but we
Mm,
we get it. So we share that similar passion, and it's been so life changing for
mm,
obviously for both of our families. But
yes,
I
totally.
wanted to jump in. I mean, I wish we had hours and hours to talk nations, and you and I definitely need that. But I wanted to just pitch you just a more general question to kind of kick us off. Is I've been following you recently over the last number of months. You've made a couple trips around the world that you've kind of particularly highlighted on Instagram so that people could really understand some of what you're
Mm,
seeing. And it's been so fun. And I've always been like guessing where you are because I've probably been to some of these places before. And I'm like, I think I
you
kind of
definitely
recognize
have.
that.
Yes.
And I just want to ask the general question: what in general do you feel like you're seeing God do, particularly among the unreached and some of these areas of the world with little to no access to the gospel? You've been doing this for a number of years now. What do you feel like you're seeing unique to where we are this time that we're in right now?
Well, I mean, the first thing that come to my mind, and it's not even just because, yeah, of all that God's doing in the send, but it is definitely what is the first thing that comes to my mind is God is mobilizing his
Hmm.
church among the nations, specifically the next generation among the nations, to take the gospel to all the nations. So like in most of the places I've been over the last year, they're predominantly unreached contexts. So yeah, places where there's little or less access to the gospel, but that doesn't mean there's no church there. I mean, I've been gathering with believers in those places, and so 18 to 30-year-olds in these different places, all of them Asian countries, who are saying, hey, when you look at the world and the people that are least reached with the gospel, the majority of them are in Asia, and we want to take responsibility for leading the way to reach them. And
Wow.
so, and just super hungry. I think about, I mean, you've been to Myanmar,
Hmm.
but be with a room of 750 or 1,000, um, 18 to 30-year-olds who are walking through all kinds of challenges, just being in Myanmar amidst civil war and everything else there right now, but saying we want to take responsibility. And
Wow.
not just responsibility. We want to jump into the joy that's involved in taking the gospel to unreached people in Myanmar and throughout Southeast Asia and
Come
beyond.
on. Wow.
I think about Bangladesh was recently just with a room. They said when I looked at this room, they said there were going to be 500 people in there, and I was like, "There's no chance you can get 500 people in there." But sure enough, like they crammed in again. 18 to 25, 30-year olds cramming into this room for hours every day for multiple days, all focused on how can we take the gospel to, I mean, Bengali speaking Muslims are one of the largest, if not the
Yeah.
largest unreached people group in the world. But in our community and far beyond, and
Wow.
with yeah, with risk, with zeal that's willing to pay the price. Like I remember my first morning there in Bangladesh. First person I got together with that morning, I was like, "Hey, tell me about the." We were having a conversation about a number of things, but I said, "Tell me about the cost of following Jesus in some parts here, and including the people who will be coming to this gathering over the next few days." And immediately she started talking about martyrs she knew. She started
Wow.
talking about money they have set aside, like in their budgets for hospital bills when people get beaten for becoming followers of Jesus or for spreading the gospel. She talked about money for funeral costs. So,
Wow.
um,
Wow.
and yet joy,
Yeah.
like these guys. I mean,
Yeah.
like it's not like it's subdued. Like, okay, if we've got to go to the nations with the gospel, we'll go. Like, yes, we get to do this. This is worth
Wow.
our lives.
Come on.
So yeah, I would say that is a consistent theme that I've seen in all the places that I've been in
Wow.
ways that are so encouraging.
That's
And I'm
incredible.
like, I'm coming from obviously a more reached, an incredibly reached place in
Yeah.
the U.S. and even more so when I was pastoring in the southeastern U.S. But regardless, I mean, there's churches, followers of Jesus, and I'm just like, I don't want to miss out. Like, I want to be a part of. I want to lock arms with you. Let's do this
Yeah.
together.
Yeah. Wow. That's incredible. Another kind of part of this, I'm curious what you're seeing is, the God's moving everywhere and on in every nation among every people group. But of course, there are maybe times and seasons where you see the movement particularly expanding in certain parts of the world. And a lot of
Mm.
people talking about the church in Iran right now. Some talking
Ooh.
about the significance of the growth of Nepal. But in your travels and with your relationships, where do you feel like you're seeing some of these surges of growth or just a movement of the kingdom that is unique and is really growing in significant ways?
Oh man. Well, so multiple pictures come to my mind, and I want to ask you the same question. So I'm about to turn it back around on you. But so what's come to my mind is definitely, I mean, what you mentioned in Iran, for example, and even I would say it's some different parts of the Middle East
Mm,
that are uniquely more open. So it's still not. I wouldn't call it like surge of
yeah.
it's not
Yep.
like spiritual awakening, but I think about like just what God is doing in a place like Saudi right now
Yeah.
that
It's
is
astounding.
more open to the gospel than ever before. Like I think is really unique. Yeah. So there's some openness, but not. I wouldn't categorize that as like spiritual awakening. Yeah. This well in some senses, but
Yeah.
not
Right.
not like growth of the church that's just
Right.
multiplying. Um, I would say, well, another picture that comes to my mind that we were just talking about before we started was just the mobilization picture that's happening in
Mm,
Brazil. The
yeah.
mobilization picture, and you know a ton more about that, but the mobilization of this picture that's happening in the church in Brazil, I think I would say in some parts of the church in sub-Saharan Africa, but I think there's still so much untapped there that there's just there are multitudes of followers of Jesus
Yeah.
that can really, especially in reaching North Africa and into the Middle East. And then for sure, like I mean, like I was saying, the places where I've been recently have all been Asian countries, and obviously what God has done in China over
Yeah.
the the long for decades now
Yeah.
that has created quite an army with the gospel
Yes.
in China, and so and other Asian countries around there, but that's obviously a large one. But I mean, I was in
Yeah.
India too. There's certainly pictures of that there as well. So what about you?
Wow, that's incredible. Well, I think for me, we were sharing before, like part of the reason I've so enjoyed following you is my heart is so drawn towards least reached places around the world. And throughout the last 20 plus years, I've been able to spend a fair amount of time in nations like that and among people like that. And it's just one of my greatest joys and passions and honors. But a lot of the last several years, because of the momentum of the Send, where we are working on the mobilization side, are often historically Christian regions. So I haven't gotten to spend as much time. But yeah, you just hear remarkable stories, like you said, of what's happening in Iran. I would think in some of the places we're working, one of the biggest shocks to me over the last 5 years has been the increased opportunity and openness of Central Asia. And it
Mm,
really does feel like a window of time for Central Asia, the region of the world with the smallest number of missionaries
so
of any particular region in the world. And yet, really quite remarkable and unprecedented open doors and opportunities into this region. And I'm just amazed by the number of young people that maybe, 2 months ago that would come through here couldn't have pronounced Kazakhstan to save their lives or certainly found it on a
mm,
map. And 3 months
mm,
later have tears for these regions because God is really knitting their hearts to Central Asia. So that is a place we spend a lot of time in prayer, and I'm just
mm.
curious to see what God's going to do as this region continues to open. Like Saudi, I tell our young staff, I'm like, guys, 15 years ago we couldn't have dreamt that
Mm.
people would be like, "Oh, I'm just going to Saudi." Like that was impossible to just go to
Yes.
Saudi. And
Yes.
now, we had a team come back and report in a staff meeting. They're like, "So, we were in Saudi," and they're just telling about their Saudi trip, and I was like, "Hold up. Like 15 years ago, no one was saying like when we were in Saudi, and that now that's
Yes.
happening is just incredible."
Yes, bro. And I mean, so the bigger picture, so less specific to different countries, but that's where I was just in my time with the Lord a couple days ago, was in Esther, and I know it's like an overquoted verse, but for such a time as this, I
Yes.
just think about what
Yeah.
a time to be alive right now. Like when I think about, um, I talk about this a lot. Like Paul, he could only have dreamed. Like how long did it
Yes.
take him to walk from city to city, to get on a
Yes.
boat over a course of weeks, months, and it didn't always
Yes.
work out very well for him. Like
No.
he never could have imagined being able to ride in a machine through the air and land just about anywhere in the world in a day.
Yeah.
Like that's
Yes.
crazy.
It is.
And then how long it took him to like write a letter or dictate it and have it sent for over weeks or months, and wait weeks or months to get a reply. And the fact that we have devices that we can communicate with people around the world in real time in multiple languages, and we carry this around in our pocket. This
It's
is crazy. With the day
crazy.
we live in and the
Yeah.
opportunities we have, and I think that's part of it. I think that's part of what
Yeah.
God's doing in the next generation. It's like look at like all these things that can be used for bad. Man, they can be used for so much good. We can do like people Paul would have dreamed. I mean, he could have never fathomed the opportunities we have. So the fact that, and we talk about it all the time, like 3 billion people with little to no access to the gospel, but more opportunities than ever before in history to
Yeah.
reach them. And
Yes.
and then you layer on top of that some of the geopolitical dynamics that are
Yep.
happening in
Yeah.
different places, and you realize Acts 17:25 and 26, that God's orchestrating all this in his sovereignty, that people might seek him and know him, like
Come
just.
on.
And so I just think there's a generation that is like, yes, we want to
Yes.
jump in that
Yeah.
river and flow with it. Like we don't
Yes.
want to miss out. We want to be a part of that.
100%. Let's take some time and speak specifically to that generation. So, we got a bunch of probably young millennials and Gen Z that are getting stirred up for the nations. And a lot of the data, even in America, Barna's stats are showing that over 50% of young Bible believing Christians in America would consider foreign missions for a future vocation. Not that they necessarily will end up doing that, but they're open to it. So, you're working with youth in America, you're working with youth in India and Bangladesh and across Asia, many different nations. In your experience, what do you find to be the number one obstacle that a young person is facing today between that real God moment where they're like, I'm called, and them being able to walk that out? What would you say is the biggest obstacle you're seeing for young people today to step into their calling as a missionary to the unreached?
Oh man, that's a really good question, and I'm gonna turn that back on you too, because I really would love to know your answer to that. So a couple things are coming to my mind, I mean the overarching picture that's coming to my mind is Ephesians 6 right now. We're walking through this as a church family, but just the devil's many schemes. Like he has so many. We were talking about this, and our family worship time with our kids last night, just like he has so many schemes that are different for different ones of us. I mean, at the core, they're the same.
Mm,
Don't trust God. Do things your own way. But he just gains footholds in our lives in different ways. So I just think, man, there's like part of me thinks, okay, there's like thousands of different schemes he's
yeah,
got, because I
yeah,
mean,
that's good.
especially when it comes to this conversation,
Yeah,
because he wants 3 billion people to be left in the dark. Like he is
right,
working with all the
right.
force of hell to keep people from hearing the gospel.
Yeah,
And he'll use all kinds of means toward that. So, but then I do think it, and so maybe it certainly applies different to different people, but even at different places, like in the US, at least, yeah, the context where I spend a lot of my time just as a
yeah,
pastor,
yeah.
yeah, it's the temptation to casual cultural Christianity that turns a blind eye and a deaf ear to the nations, which is what
Wow.
I think sadly describes much of the church in the United States on a whole. And so that's not going to be the same in some other places. But if I were to say, okay, one obstacle. I'm going to give you two.
Yeah.
One would be just plain sin, like just having how to think about pornography is just a stronghold that is choking out zeal
Wow.
for God and zeal for His
Mm,
purposes in the world in so many yeah, and in multiple generations, including the next generation. And just, yeah, so, and that's one example, but just sin, just
yeah.
sinful strongholds, like the battle, like zeal for the nations is the overflow of intimacy with
Wow.
Jesus.
That's
And
good.
when the adversary wants to yeah, prevent zeal for the nations, then he's just gonna attack zeal for intimacy with Jesus. So just sin, period, sin struggles. But then the second thing that comes to my mind is I do think many people kind of picture work spreading the gospel among the nations as kind of other, or that's for somebody else to do. And I think that's very common where I live, and I think it's common in a lot of the places that I've been in over the last year. I think it's just like, okay, I think that's extreme. That's for certain people who have certain gifts. I think it's very different than um Acts 8 kind of picture,
Yeah. Yeah.
when the whole church scattered,
Yeah.
ironically, except the apostles. So it was actually kind of the most gifted people, or the leaders, Acts 8 says, who stayed in Jerusalem. Everybody else was scattering, and it was just normal, ordinary, everyday people. That's part of what, one of the texts that I just find myself going back to over and over again as I've traveled to different places.
Mhm.
Like, this is ordinary, unnamed believers. Like, who started the church at Antioch? The One of the greatest
Yeah.
churches in the history of Christianity that would send out missionaries and just change the landscape of the Roman Empire. Like, who planted that church? And we don't even know their names. Like, we
Yeah.
don't know their names. They were unnamed, ordinary believers with no church planting
Wow.
experience, no seminary training. They were just followers of Jesus, proclaiming the word wherever they went. And I just think we have this tendency to think that's us. That's a special calling for a few people, instead of that's the general command for all of us.
Yeah.
Go and make disciples of all the nations. I think we just we have a tendency to farm that out to a few people and just kind of move on with our lives like that's not us.
Wow. That's really good.
What do you
Great
think?
answer. I mean, I think what you said is so real. And sometimes maybe the obstacles are also um, a little bit more practical, maybe a young person not knowing how do I go from this inspirational
Mm.
moment or this what feels like a
Mm-hmm.
real God moment to where do I go? What do I do? What's my next step? And then maybe another on the practical side would be pictures. Like maybe I sometimes feel like we are not painting a clear enough picture of what can a missionary look like. What does that
Mm-hmm.
lifestyle can look like? What are the skill sets of a missionary? What might be in their hands as they were to head to another nation? So maybe on the other side, kind of the practical side, is sometimes people just go, I'm just not really sure what my next step is to do this. And what does it mean? What does it look like if I were to live in Central Asia? What am I doing when I wake up in the morning? So helping present a clear picture of the missionary life, which of course can be very different in different locations and different callings, but stirring the imagination of young people with this is what it could look like. Can you
Mm.
envision yourself doing that? Just like you would for almost any career where people begin to get excited about career, part of it is their imagination gets stirred towards that thing. Which
Love
kind of
that.
leads me to another question
I
for you. I
love
was
that.
thinking about in the same for young people, if you could, because you've been around, Gen Z a lot, you're speaking at different events with young people, young millennials. If you feel like there was one primary, like theological building block that this generation is missing or needs to step into their potential and their calling as a missionary, what would be that theological insertion that you go, man, if this one thing, and I know it's always more than one, but if you had to narrow it down, if this one thing, this one theological building block were to land in the heart of a generation, it would only help catalyze them into real long-term fruit in the nations. What
Mm.
what would that be, you think?
Oh man, you're killing me with like the one barrier, one building block.
Or
There's
two
so
or
much.
three?
No,
Like,
I got
pick
you.
pick
No,
your
no, it's
favorite
good.
one.
It's yeah, no, it's a good. It's no, it's good. It's good because yeah, we could talk about a million things, but I think most. I think this is true. Actually, not just of young people. I think this is true of the whole church. At least, yeah, yeah, and but including young people would be like next generations would be, do we really believe that Jesus, hearing the good news, the gospel of Jesus,
Mm,
and believing that gospel is necessary to uh, experience eternal life with God and be
mm.
saved from everlasting hell?
Wow, that's good.
That question, because I think most people, most followers of Jesus don't believe
Wow.
that Jesus is necessary. And here's why I say that. I That's the only reason I can come up with for why we're not running after the nations, like the whole church
Yes.
talking about this all the time. Surely
Right.
we don't believe there are 3 billion people on a road that leads to eternal suffering,
Wow.
and they can't be saved from their sin and given eternal life with Jesus if they don't hear the gospel, if somebody doesn't share the gospel with them. Romans 10, faith comes by hearing, hearing by the word of Christ. And I think surely we don't believe that and we're sitting back just kind of coasting through Christianity. I think we
Wow.
have this underlying assumption that they're going to be okay. That and certainly we can't be following Jesus and like have no heart for reaching them. So it's just like what is it that's
Wow.
missing? And so I really
Yeah.
believe a firm conviction, and I've seen it. Like when I walk people through, and I am thinking specifically about next generation here. When I walk people through, like, here's what the Bible teaches. Walk through Romans, for
Yeah.
example, at these truths that show the need for the gospel, that people cannot be saved. This is Romans 10, 12 to 15. Like, they cannot be saved without hearing the gospel. That's why we must go and preach it to them. And when that clicks, I like see like jaws go on the ground, like people might be taking
Wow.
notes. They just kind of drop whatever they're taking. Like, what am I doing here? Like, we got to do something about this. And it's that sense that's just driven by they need to hear about Jesus, and they won't hear about Jesus if we don't go, if somebody doesn't go and tell them. And
Wow.
yes, I know that God speaks in dreams and visions and through all kinds of circumstances. At the same time, we don't see one verse in the book of Acts where the gospel is moving forward apart from a human instrument
Yeah. Yeah.
proclaiming it. Yeah, we
Super
see dreams
important.
and visions there, but
Yeah.
it's Peter, go and talk to
Yeah.
Cornelius. It's so we are the plan. I mean, God could
Yeah.
put the Roman road in the sky tonight and just like
Yeah.
solve this, but he's not
Right.
doing that.
Right.
He's instead chosen to put his Holy Spirit
Wow.
in
That's
us
so
to make
good.
this happen. And so to believe that, to be like, whoa, this is massive need. I would call it like the greatest injustice. Not that
Yeah.
there's injustice in God, but 3 billion people on a road that leads to eternal hell who've never even heard how they could be saved for everlasting life in heaven through Jesus. Like that's got to change. We got to change that.
Yes.
How do we
Yeah.
give our lives to that? But I think there's something missing there on a convictional level that
Wow.
needs to be addressed.
Wow.
So
That is
yeah,
so good. Wow. So
what do you
well
think?
said. Well,
What would you add?
I was just gonna reflect on something you said. I was watching something not too long ago you were sharing somewhere, and maybe you said this a number of times, but it stuck with me, and I've said it a number of times since then. At some point, the reality of over 3 billion people being unreached must become completely unacceptable to us.
Yes,
And
yes,
that
yes.
line struck me so strong
Mm,
that this cannot be like a vision, a mission,
mm,
a good idea. At some point, the reality that there are billions of people who will never walk by a church in their life, who will never know a believer in their life, who will never even lay eyes on a Bible in their life in their mother tongue, that at some point for the rest of the church of the world, that has to become completely and
mm,
utterly unacceptable. And I don't remember where
yes.
you were, maybe you say that a lot, but it struck
Mm,
me so
mm.
deeply when you said that. Just expound on that idea a little bit further, in what's in
Yeah.
your heart on that.
Yes, well, like what will it take for the concept of unreached people to become totally intolerable to us? Like
Yeah,
this should not be. This should not be. And this
intolerable.
is yeah, and this is where I think there might be people listening to this who might be thinking, okay, I mean, is this just like you guys like pet passion in a sense?
Yeah,
Like, okay, that's what
yeah.
you're passionate about. Other people are passionate about this or that. And that's where I was talking with a pastor the other day that he didn't put it that way, but he basically put it that way. Like, hey, is this just what you're passionate about? And he was,
Wow.
uh, and I was like, okay, let's think about this. Um, like look at the end of the story. Like Revelation 7, 9 and 10. That's where all of history is headed. Like this is
Yes.
and God's designed it this way. The culmination of the whole story is every nation, tribe, people, and language gather around his throne, giving him praise. That's what everything is leading toward. Like everything, without exception, everything in
Yes.
history is leading to that. So that's got to be the goal that we're focused on. So God's passion for his own glory among all the nations, like that's not a calling for a few. This is the reason why we're here.
Yeah.
And it's obviously going to play out in all of our lives differently. At the same time, this is the goal that we're all supposed to be living for. This was the turning point for me in college. Like when I was, I'll never forget where I was sitting in a university setting, and somebody just opened the Bible, and for an hour, Jeff
Wow.
Lewis, he walked from Genesis to Revelation, and he showed this is the whole story. God is passionate about his glory being exalted among all the nations. And I'd grown up in the church. I had maybe somebody had tried to show me this. I don't remember it, but I had
Mm.
totally missed it. And it was like this light, but that was the jaw on the ground moment for me. Like, whoa, I gotta live for this. Like this is my whole purpose in life. And
Wow.
that doesn't mean, okay, that meant I need to be, I thought that meant I was going to be a missionary. Like I thought that was going to mean I was going to move overseas, and maybe one day I will. I still hold out hope of a one-way
Oh
ticket,
man,
but
me
at
too.
this,
Me
at
too.
this point, God's not called me to do that.
Yeah.
But But that's where I tell a story often about another turning point for me was when I thought I was going to be a missionary. I'm talking to the head of an international missions organization. I'm like, Heather and I were married at that point. Like, hey, we're ready to go. And he looked back at me and he was like, well, okay, that's one option. And then he started talking to me a lot about the need for pastors to lead churches where the gospel has gone for the spread of the gospel where it hasn't gone. And I
Okay.
was so
Wow.
confused. I was like, I was like, I think this guy's talking to me out of becoming a missionary, which is totally not what I expected him to do. But I
Right.
was so thankful for that conversation that day because he put a category in my mind that wasn't there before. And the
Wow.
category was there's a type of person who's passionate about the spread of the gospel among all the nations, but who doesn't become a missionary. And then I was like, well, of course there's a category for that. It's called a Christian.
Yeah.
The spirit of Christ wants the world for Christ, wants the nations for Christ. If we have the spirit of Christ in us, we want the nations for Christ. This is every follower of Jesus zealous for the spread of the gospel in the nations. And
Yeah.
yes, God calls some people to move to other nations and a lot of people to move to other nations. But that doesn't mean it's just those people that are passionate about that. Like, this is who we are as the body of Christ. So I don't know, felt led to kind of dive in a little bit
That's
there,
good.
just
That's
so that
really good.
we don't walk away from this conversation be like, oh, Andy
Yep.
and David are passionate about that. That's great for them. But I really like convictionally believe this is
Yeah.
for all of us as followers of
Yes.
Jesus.
Yes, 100%. Let's go a little bit deeper on that, specifically talking to a number of people that will be listening to this are pastors, leaders of ministries or missions orgs or youth pastors, pastors of churches. I think one of the most remarkable things that I know about your leadership and your church is being able to have a church in America that is radically focused on the nations. And this is a big part of the Send's ultimate goal is that the church of the world would make the Great Commission the center of the conversation. The center of the conversation of global Christianity would be the final commands of Jesus and Jesus's glory among every single tribe, tongue, and nation. So, speak to the pastors, leaders, youth pastors for a moment as to how do you help a church that's in suburban area of America or rural area of America or urban center, wherever it may be. What does it look like to help a church have a passion for the unreached? How have you done that in your own experience? How have you done that at your church? How are you doing that among your youth? Like, just even practically, what does that look like?
Oh man, so good. I would say foundationally, even the conviction we were just talking about is so key.
Yep.
Like, for any pastor, youth pastor, any leader, not so this is not just for the missions pastor kind of over on the side over here. If that's the case, then we'll just have the global purpose of God becomes a
Yeah.
compartmentalized program in the church. Like,
Yes.
that is
Right.
not that's not the, so this is something that a pastor, a youth pastor, any ministry leader should be trumpeting as a part of whatever that ministry is. I mean, that's part of what I love about pastoring. And even like when I think about if a child like grows up in our church family, like I want them in children's ministry and student ministry hearing Christianity is zeal for the spread of the gospel among all the nations. Like, this is not just like, this is what it means to be a Christian, to be a follower of Jesus. And that starts like young. That starts with,
Yeah.
yeah, helping kids know there's unreached people in the world who've never heard the gospel. And we give, we pray, we as a church work together to get the gospel to them. And that's where really convictionally to believe, okay, I as a pastor, as a leader in a local church, I'm still a part of a global mission. So I don't have the option of just focusing on the community around me. When there's
Yeah.
3 billion people who've never heard the gospel,
Wow.
I'm a part of a bigger picture. So yes, of course I focus on the community around me. This is where God has put me. God's put me in Metro Washington, D.C. So we are making disciples, I would add, of the nations here. And this applies to, I mean, there are some places in the world that may be more homogenous and just more monoethnic, but I mean, most cities for sure, but even many rural areas have people from the nations. So that's where I would just lean into, are you making disciples of the nations right around you, of the peoples,
Yeah.
of different ethnic groups, or Are you just making disciples among people who look like you and think like you?
Mm,
And so that starts with intentional, even cross-cultural ministry in many cases, right where you are.
yeah.
Um, but then lifting your eyes and saying, okay, we're making disciples here. And I would add, like what we're doing in the community around us is we're not just making disciples of the nation, we're making disciples for the nations. So I want to shepherd a church that's leading people to Jesus, and not just leading them to follow Jesus with their eyes just focused right around them, with their eyes focused on reaching the nations with the gospel. That's the kind of disciples we want to make, who are
That's good.
disciple makers for the nations.
Wow.
So that, yeah, even to go back to when a high schooler goes off to college, I want them, I hope they're thinking about, like, how can I spend my life for the spread of God's glory among the nations? How can I not just go to college and with just the goal of living out a nice, comfortable Christian spin on the American dream? Like, I'm created for so much more than that. That may
Yeah.
mean I live here. It may mean I live somewhere else. My life's His to spend toward that end. So making disciples for the nations, and then along the way, helping them see the opportunities that there are to do that. So that's where a short-term mission comes in, midterm, whether that's 2 months or 6 months or a year or two, DTS type thing, where they can be a part of what God's doing among the nations. Certainly looking for opportunities to partner together with our brothers and sisters in places around the world. That's part of what we're trying to do a ton of, just through Radical, is help make connections between the church here and the least reached, like great work that's happening on the front lines of the least reached people around the
Yeah.
world, and build connections as the body of Christ together. So we're a part of that. Certainly that involves use of our resources. Where your treasure
Yeah.
is, there your heart will be also. So where are we spending our treasure? That's going to have a huge effect on our hearts. And then, so the last thing I would add, in an Acts 13 kind of sense, Paul and Barnabas being sent out, I think any size church anywhere uh, should be praying for God to send out people from among us to take the gospel, move to where the gospel hasn't gone, in a Paul and Barnabas type way. And I just think, like, we periodically in our church family have kind of Acts 13 weekends where we worship,
Wow.
fast, pray, and we just kind of set aside. Now I want to be clear. This is not just preaching a mission sermon once a year. We're
Yeah.
talking mission to the nations all the time.
All the
But
time.
once or twice a year, we do try to set aside time where we say, okay, we're going to fast, we're going to pray, and just ask, is God setting apart any of us to go? And we're just all, including us, like my family, we're all just going to put our lives down on the table in a fresh way. And Lord, who do you want to go? And I'm convinced that if we're doing
Wow.
that on a
Yeah.
regular basis in any church of any size, with 3 billion people who've never heard the gospel, with the Spirit of God in us, He's going to call some of us out. And then to have a process to help people go and put that into practice.
Wow.
And the last thing I would add, oh man, there's so much coming
No,
to mind.
say it.
Just
Say it.
one other quick thing is also for people to be constantly thinking about the natural opportunities that are there just in the globalization of the marketplace. So
Yeah.
opportunities for students to go study among the nations.
Yeah.
Like I was just
Yeah.
talking with a girl who is getting into a really hard country, where a lot of people are getting kicked out of this country. She's got a wide open door because she's going to study at this university. So
Wow.
so instead of just assuming I'm going to get a degree down the street or in a place that's comfortable to me here, or a place that's got whatever, like, how can I look for opportunities to study among the nations where the gospel hasn't gone? Similarly, like, work, to think through job opportunities. I think about one brother who came up to me in the lobby one day. He was just like, all right, pastor, I took a job in Saudi. What do I do now? And
Whoa.
so,
Come
like,
on.
but they're intentionally looking for opportunities. I think of another guy I was meeting with not long ago who just, he has a job. Well, his job is basically paying for him to go learn a language and live in another culture. And he just got back from one country where he helped spread the gospel in a way that planted a church in the 2-year assignment that he had there. He's about to go to another 2-year assignment somewhere else. Like, God has organized the globalization of the marketplace for the spread of His glory among the nations, if we'll open our
Wow.
eyes to it, the opportunities that are there all the time.
Wow.
So,
That's incredible. Now, you said so many good things there, and I'm thinking the pastor, youth pastor that might be watching this And a couple data points that are helpful that just help us see how much need there is. There is Barna's survey showed that only 13% of American churchgoers even know what the Great Commission is anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So we're talking, a huge percentage, 87% of Americans have maybe either never heard of the Great Commission, or number two, have heard of it but don't know what it means, leaving only 13% that actually know what the Great Commission is, which you do have to wonder, if we're not talking about the Great Commission on Sunday mornings, like, what are we talking about as the vision of the church? But then secondly, today only 1% of pastors in all of America self-evaluated that they had a fruitful local outreach. So 1%. So when we're talking about the outworking of the Great Commission locally, and even their understanding, our understanding of the Great Commission globally, we're probably at some all-time lows. And yet at the same time, you have this young generation that when you mention foreign missions, they're like, oh, I would totally consider that for my future calling. So there's a gap between the young generation that's rising up, that when they hear about this stuff, they hear you share and they're like, I'm in, what do I do? And then maybe the culture of the church today that has not emphasized the Great Commission. So my
Mm-hmm.
question to you in this is obviously you guys are down the road on what this looks like for your church. Acts 13 weekends, you are sending long-term missionaries as in the marketplace, or probably some as traditional vocational missionaries. You're preaching about it on Sunday mornings. You can't not, it's in you. But for the Church of America that leaders and pastors might be watching, we talk a lot about culture shift. Like, how do you move a culture towards a certain direction? And maybe the culture shift is out of unbelief and you're just trying to develop a community that has a culture of faith. But if you were to give advice on how do you develop a Great Commission culture in your church, no, if someone's totally honest and just goes, I'm part of the 99% that does not have a fruitful outreach to our local community, I'm part of the 87% where my members don't know what the Great Commission is, how would you begin the process, or what are your first couple things you would coach a pastor or youth pastor in to make the culture shift that their community would become a Great Commission focused community?
Man, that's such a good question. All
First
right.
steps,
So,
they feel
first
overwhelmed.
steps,
Yeah, they're
first
totally
steps,
overwhelmed.
simple steps, I would say. So here are some things that I would throw out. One, uh, like incorporate prayer for unreached people, specifically unreached people, into your gatherings.
So
Like
good.
I think about one small rural church, they just started doing that. Like they just prayed for a specific people group, because what it does is it creates awareness. Wait, there's people who've
Yeah.
never heard the gospel before.
Yes.
Why are we praying for them? Because we've been given a commission. It's what the church exists for, to get the gospel to all of them. And so just a few minutes, highlighting the church, unreached people group. Let's pray for them, and then God starts to change the hearts of people in the church. I mean, that was a major culture shifter for a church I'm thinking of specifically. So that's one simple step,
It's
and
really good.
obviously for a leader to be doing that is a culture shaper for ourselves. Two, I would encourage, so for especially for anybody who is regularly teaching, preaching, casting vision for the church, like to try to think intentionally through just making application here and there to the broader Great Commission. So
Mm,
not just waiting for a sermon on Matthew 28 or a text that mentions the nations, but marriage, just to make the connection. Like, marriage is for mission, marriage is for the display of the gospel in the community around us, and then just don't ever stop there. And around the world, we want to show a biblical picture of marriage to the
that's good.
nations that shows very different. So just look for opportunities in your teaching, casting vision, to make application broader to mission. I would say, like, certainly on the local area, on when it comes to local ministry, like, dive in. Like, what would be one practical way we can, as a church, be more intentional about local mission, and even thinking, like we were talking about earlier, like local mission to the nations or across cultures here, like to
Yeah.
really think through. And then similarly, I would say, look for an opportunity to take one group of people on a short-term mission trip. Like,
Yeah.
just find a mission partner that you can work with to go, and just little by little, like help people see God's heart for the nations. And I feel like whenever I take people on short-term mission trip, like there's there are things that can happen in a week to 10 days in people's hearts there that would take 2 years to happen here. And so just to
Yeah.
be in another context in a way that you're exposing people to the need among the nations. And I would say, if you do that right, if you do short-term missions right, the heart for local ministry will increase. And it's not
Yeah.
just, okay, we just did this trip, but hey, we can do this kind of ministry together down the street in this way or that way. So that would be another practical thing. And then I would say, yeah, we talked about your treasure is there, your heart will be also, but is there a step you can take in your giving as a church to focus on, prioritize in some way places where the gospel hasn't gone?
That's really
So
good.
where your treasure is there, your heart will be also. So those would be maybe some
That's
starting
really good.
points.
Really good. Couple closing questions for you, more personal. And you may not be able to mention the exact name of the nation or the place that you were, but tell us about one of your favorite moments that you got to be with, worship with, be among the persecuted church. Like a favorite, one of your most marking moments when you found yourself in a room with persecuted believers somewhere in the world, and take us as much into that moment as you're able to while honoring security issues.
Yeah, sure. Oh man, well, the challenge is, okay, there's two come to my mind. But I really want to take you deep and well, I'll just because they're very different. One was and this was years ago, so I think, yeah, I'll speak just totally openly about this one. But this was before South Sudan even existed, but
Oh, wow.
Sudan as a country. So this was like early 2000s. And but it marked me because for 20 years Sudanese Christians had just experienced massive persecution, helicopter gunships coming through, just destroying their communities, people being, yeah, brutally treated, killed. I remember going to so and it was on the tail end, but it was a pretty volatile time. And so I'm sitting in these mud huts with these believers who've been through so much. And bro, the depth of joy and trust in the
Wow.
Lord, like I just it marked me, just their satisfaction in Jesus amidst so much suffering that they had experienced. That was just, it was clear they were living for another world. Like
Wow.
if this world is all there is, there was no reason for them to have the outlook they had. But
Wow.
this is like, rejoice and be glad, Jesus says, like, because you're living for another reward. So that picture struck me for sure. And it was like,
Wow.
okay, I I want to keep my eyes fixed on another reward, even in a world where I'm not experiencing persecution like that. Like, help me, God, to keep my eyes fixed on that. And then the other picture that comes to my mind is definitely just underground house churches in Asia. My first time there, it wasn't even supposed to happen. I'd just taken a group of people. We were just gonna be sharing the gospel on a college campus, and but we met up for dinner with a couple of underground house church leaders. They found out that I was teaching at a seminary at that time. They were like, "Hey, would you gather with our churches and church leaders?" And so for the next 2 weeks, from 8 to 12
Wow.
hours a day, it was
Oh
just
my
gathering in
goodness.
secret locations. And bro, like, I mean,
Oh,
their love for the Lord, hunger for his word. I remember the first day, I thought I was just going to like do a Bible study. It was like 2 in the afternoon. I thought we were going to do a Bible study for an hour or two. Like 8 hours later, we're still going strong. And they're like, "Can we get together again tomorrow?" And I was like,
oh
"Yeah,
my
sure." And
goodness.
I was like, "Tomorrow afternoon, tomorrow night?" They're like, "No, in the morning. We want to go all day." And I was walking through, I was walking through Nehemiah at one point. I was just showing them Nehemiah 8, the importance of the Word of God and the people of God. And I was giving them background and history of the book and just the setup for this context. And they came up to me afterwards. They were like, "We've never heard all that stuff before. Can you do that for us with all the books of the Old Testament?" And I was like, Well, I guess, sure. So, man, that's what we did for the next
That
week and a half. It was
oh
just
my
like Old
gosh.
Testament survey, and they are soaking in every bit of. We had 1 day left. I remember we had 1 day left, and they were like, "We want to go 12 hours." I was like, "Okay." And so I got there that morning. I'm like, "What do we cover?" Like, I've been through Habakkuk. What else is there? So, I started doing something, and they immediately, like, just a few minutes in, they were like, "Wait a minute. You've given us the whole Old Testament. We need the New Testament." So for the
Oh
next
my
12
gosh.
hours, we just walked through 27 New Testament books. It was just, but man, they just love the word, like to see and not just God's word. And I mean, they're risking their life to study God's
Yeah.
word. Like it is
Yes.
that important to them. And,
Totally.
but then, and this is, yeah, this is no exaggeration. Like we would, before we would dive into the word, we would just get together or we'd just fall on our knees and pray for extended periods of time. And just to hear them pray, it wasn't like these grandiose theological prayers. It was just, God, thank you for the way you love
Wow.
us. Thank you for protecting us. Would pray for your protection. And we would get up and literally there are puddles of tears around the room.
Oh my
Like they
gosh.
just, and this is the people who, it's not like they're just overly emotional people. Like they live in a
Yeah.
culture where everything's about saving face. They just love Jesus. And
Wow.
so, man, those,
Wow.
I mean, I could feel myself back in that room right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, that marked
That's
me in a way that
incredible.
I want to mark me, right? But
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. What an honor to be in rooms like that. Well, one last question
Yes.
for you
Yes.
if you can say, what's the place you've never been that you most want to go still?
Oh, man.
If you just could
Wow.
just pick it, the most, I don't know, it could be the most remote, the most
Mhm.
unreached, but is there a place that you're like, I have not been there yet, but I want to go. I want to go so bad.
I would like if what comes to my mind, uh, well, I mean, part of what comes to my mind is like, well, I'd love to go to. I've never spent time in Australia. Like, I'd love to spend a lot of time in Australia, but something like. But when I think mission, which Australia needs the gospel too, but the first place that comes to my mind would be like remote Afghanistan.
Okay. Wow.
And for I think multiple reasons. Like we have partnerships there. I would just love to
Yeah.
I'd love to be with those brothers and sisters
Mm.
in all the challenges that are there. And the one person who has probably shaped my not probably has shaped my life most when it comes to mission, theology of mission, practice of mission, uh, is a friend of mine who's now with the Lord. He's my age, or was my age, but had a brain tumor. His name's Jonathan, and but
Wow.
he spent years of his life there, and so I would love to go back and just
Wow.
I say go back. I've never been there, but go
Yeah.
back to where he and his family served, his wife and kids. They're amazing. But to be a part of what God and God is at work there. Like God is moving there right now.
Wow.
It's so hard though. But anyway, I would love to be there.
That's a
What
good
about
one.
you? Where would you go?
Yeah.
Anywhere you've
It
not been that you would want to go?
yeah, I mean, lots I feel probably in lots of places, but if there are a couple that I think about pretty consistently, one would be kind of the remote Tibetan plateau. So, I've not spent time in Tibet, but, my the dream would be to ride a motorcycle from Kathmandu to Lhasa and stop at all these Tibetan villages along the way
Huh.
and hand out Bibles and share the
Yeah.
gospel and Jesus films, and so that's one. The second one that I've just always been intrigued with that I'm still pondering, and it is possible, I just have not done it, is Turkmenistan. And,
Hmm.
just very, very unique, closed, very unique nation. So those are a couple
Mm-hmm.
that I would really like to, just have the privilege of being in those places and,
Mm.
being with some of the few believers there, but really to be
Yeah.
among some of the least reached and be able to serve in those areas would be just
Yeah.
awesome. So those are some I
Yeah.
think about. Well, Dave, it's been so good.
Oh,
Yeah,
well.
maybe we should go together. Maybe we should do a
Yeah,
tour,
no
we'll
doubt.
go to yeah.
I love it. I love it.
We're
Yes,
both,
that's what.
yeah,
That's how we need to spend some more time together.
that's right.
Yes,
We do. We do.
on some bikes.
Um, yes. Wouldn't that be fun? Don't you think that'd
Oh,
be incredible?
that would be killer, dude.
I
Like
mean,
that.
yeah,
Yeah.
motorcycle, like just all the
Although
way.
I've never been really good on a bicycle, so like I might need to. Maybe I'll ride like sidecar
Hey,
for you, man,
we'll
or
we'll
something
give
like
you an hour lesson. You'll be just fine. I remember last time we were together. I don't know if this is the last time, actually. I think it was 2 times ago when you came to Kona. Two memories stick out, closing memories here. One was when you shared with our school. You quoted Romans 1 through, I think you went through like 7 or 8, and then could have kept going, but kind of that was the end of like the time. And I'll never forget it because that was the whole message. You literally just stood up and you quoted Romans word for word. And when you were done, that room, they were standing on their chairs, like
dude.
standing ovation at the quoting of the word of God. It
It
was
was
absolutely incredible.
man.
Our crew that was here still talks about that. It was just
Uh,
it was just the power of God. It was electric,
yeah.
you know. It
Yes.
was impressive that you'd memorized it, but it was just the word and raw,
Yes. Yes.
just raw sharing. And then the second thing was
Mm.
that we had a paddleboard race, and I'm pretty sure I beat you.
Yes, yes. All I don't remember as much you beating me as much as I remember both of us beating Francis. That's what I
That
remember.
actually is the key
Yes.
memory. We both beat
So
Francis, and
I try to block out that I lost, but I
you know what? I may
remember
not have
hold
beat
on
you
to I didn't
actually.
come in line.
You could be right, but we definitely
No,
both
no, no.
both
Yeah,
beat
I
Francis.
definitely lost, but not to Francis. That's the key.